So hello everyone, I am Sondag and today I'll be presenting our work from Asymptomatics on the visualization-based education of disease modeling for children. So this is joint work with lots of people, so Graham McNeill, Stewart, Powell, Phoebe, Asplin, Cagatay, Turkay, Faron, Moller and Darren Archambault. In this work, we designed a visualization for teaching children about the disease modeling. A sneak peek is currently shown on the screen. We integrated this visualization into a workshop for children on computational disease modeling and evaluated this visualization and workshop in our paper. When we started this work, there were a few visualizations already out there. So one type is the in-depth model visualizations for experts. So these are papers written by experts for experts of epidemiology, of public health, to figure out what's going on with the disease and how it is spreading. On the other hand, we have the minimalistic illustrative visualizations for the general public. So these are visualizations that show how does exponential spread work in general, how does disease spread in general, what can you practically do about the disease, what should you be doing as a person. So they're great for getting a basic understanding of the disease and how this can spread, but they're a bit lacking in depth for educational purposes. Our goal was to develop an in-between between these two, so more than the minimalistic illustrative visualizations, but not as complex and as in-depth as the visualizations for experts because they're too hard to learn. So this would help us teach a broad audience of children how the disease models work and how different public health interventions affect the result of this model and give intuition behind why certain decisions are made. To develop this visualization, we collaborated with 3 different groups of experts: epidemiologist researchers, visualization researchers, and educators. And we took input from all involved parties. It was quite crucial that we actually talked really to the educators and epidemiologists, even though we as visualization researchers already had experience both on COVID visualization in particular and on teaching. Feedback from the epidemiologists ensured that the model was sufficiently realistic, and it also gave us guidance on which aspects of disease are the most critical to communicate and are unique to COVID. While feedback from the educators, on the other hand, made it clear what would and wouldn't hold the attention of the children. We discussed this for them over a number of months before we eventually ended up with these 7 design criteria. The first one is that it should be understandable by 8-year-old children with minimal explanation, as this is our lowest age target audience. It should also reflect epidemiological models, as we're trying to educate about disease modeling. In the specific setting we're working in small groups or by individuals, so the visualization should be usable by these groups. It should also be easily accessible via tablets and PC to prevent long and disengaging setup times. In our workshop setting, that we'll explain in a little bit, we have about an hour of time for the children to interact with the visualization, so there should be enough depth that they can keep exploring and keep learning from the visualization. The interaction with the model should be quite quick, as this allows them for experimentation and it also allows them to stay engaged with it. And last but not least, the visualization should be fun and engaging to keep their attention to them and let them learn about the subject. All these criteria into account, we developed 2 different visualizations for pupils to interact with and learn from. First, a relatively simple visualization shown here to explore the basic concepts before we go towards a more advanced model to increase the depth of knowledge. So here you can see the disease spreading. Each circle or particle here represents a person, and the color indicates whether they're healthy, whether they're sick. And you can see the legend of this on the left bottom. The small gray discs around the people when they're infected indicate which other people they can infect. And so in this way, they can see how a disease spreads to a community in here, and they can play with all kinds of parameters to figure out how does this disease model work, how do we interact with it. So we discussed the design with the educators, and we mentioned that we were trying to keep it simple to prevent ourselves from overloading the children. However, they actually encouraged us to include much more parameters, such that the children can really keep exploring and relating to it. So this is a more advanced simulation. So here we have a commuting pattern between home and school, something that children should be able to relate to quite well. So it's similar as before. The little particles represent people and the colors represent their states. The model is a little bit more complex. It now includes asymptomatics, as we have in COVID as well. It includes vaccination. And there's a whole bunch of parameters that the students can play with and really explore what does it mean if the disease is slightly more infective, what does it mean if people get vaccination, what's the end result on these kind of models in here. We integrated this visualization into a half-day workshop. So the workshop has about 25 to 30 children per workshop. The children are between 8 and 16 years old and is given in rural area of Wales. So far they've given about 50 of these workshops, reaching about 1,200 people, and it's still ongoing, so there's about 100 more children reached every month. The workshop consists of 3 parts. First, we have a standard presentation, and this way we can set a narrative. And the narrative is modeling a zombie outbreak through disease modeling. And with this narrative set, they learn about the basics of disease modeling, and they learn a little bit about probability and how this works. After this first part, they start putting their knowledge into practice. And the way we're going to do that is by simulating a zombie outbreak in the class. And for that, we're going to use the children themselves to indicate the people. We're going to use a little piece of string, which you can see them holding up here, which indicates who has been zombified by whom. And there's a coin that essentially determines, are you getting infected or are you not getting infected? And in this way, it's kind of a visualization of the process. And people can get an intuition of how this is happening, what is going on in here, and give some little insight on how the disease modeling works. Of course, this only works on very small scales. So afterwards, we use the visualization to go towards computer-based modeling for larger scale and more realistic models. So this is our workshop setting. So let's see how well it actually performed. So we evaluated the workshop using 3 methods. First, we had pupil surveys to 140 pupils, asking questions about how did they experience it, did they learn anything, did the visualization help? And the conclusion here is that the students actually enjoyed it quite a lot, and they also seem to indicate that they learned a lot, even if they already thought they knew a lot in advance. We've also asked their teachers to figure out how did they view the workshop, and overall this was quite positive results. Finally, we interviewed 2 of the facilitators who were giving the workshop, asking the questions about whether the workshop was effective in teaching and the impact of the visualization. And they were quite positive well, and they really saw that the children learned from it, from the visualization as well, and that the visualization had a positive impact on the workshop as a whole. So what can we take away? So first of all, if you look at interdisciplinary collaboration for classroom-based SIGCHI, we found that both domain knowledge and education expertise really is required. In our case, collaborating with both of these really improved design. Even though the visualization research already had experience with disease modeling, visualization and teaching, these expertise still really helps. Secondly, we should aim to develop for all students, not just the average students. So we should aim for the weaker students to make sure that it's understandable for them, as well as have enough depth for the stronger student. I also highly recommend integrating HCI into a larger whole and using more traditional means such as presentations together with visualization and other methods to develop one coherent whole as strong as its parts. Additionally, we found that particles are quite fun. In our design, we use particles to create parallels between a larger whole. So we start from the physical, where we have people and string and coin, and we go towards the digital. Also, their simple appearance does not seem to deter engagement, so you don't need a lot of bells and whistles to actually make something fun and engaging. Finally, relatability and discovery are important. By making it relatable for the students, you keep their attention. So in our case, we used this commuting pattern between a home and a school, which they could relate to. So don't be afraid to give students the opportunity to explore and to self-discover. This makes them more engaged with it, and in the end, it will allow them to learn more from the material in a more fun way. For the future, there are still numerous research opportunities open. One aspect that we notice is that some of the students treat the simulation almost like a game, although with no really set goal in advance. And it will be interesting to see how knowledge from the gamification community actually can be used in these kind of interactive and more open-ended simulations. And secondly, while we made one design for a simulation for disease modeling here, there are many other disciplines that use scientific computational tools that could potentially benefit from a similar approach to using presentation. Finally, I would like to thank all the collaborators for making this project possible. And with that, I would like to conclude the presentation. Thank you for your attention.